Cancel culture is real. Cross-Politic is on the front lines of this battle with the goal of creating a Christian television network and platform where we can't be canceled and where content creators will have the freedom to glorify God. Our goal is to create a space for like-minded businesses to thrive on this platform and to reach an audience that will not only buy your products and services, but also support your business when the heat of cancel culture comes your way. We want our platform to help you create an anti-fragile business as we bring together Christians from all over the world to tune in. With millions of downloads a year, access to DirecTV, Xfinity, and social media outlets, we are excited to partner with you. So, if you own a business and believe in this vision, then you need to call me. I'm Garrison Hardy, and I am the Business Development Rep at Cross-Politic and the Fight Laugh Feast Network. We are looking for businesses, large or small, that not only have great products and services, but also understand that the cultural battle that is impacting the business climate here and now. I have a background in marketing, and I'd love to help you advertise your business on Cross-Politic. Give me a call at 208-792-1290 or email me at garrison@fightlaughfeast.com.
It's maybe we need to rework the term to talk about biblical economics.
Yeah.
Is a better way of something that we want to defend versus capitalism. But capitalism, I think rightly understood, I don't want to give that away either because I don't think that they own that side of it either. You know, so what I want to defend ultimately is a biblical form of economics, right?
Right.
And I think that capitalism in a lot of ways has a lot of that built into it, at least in its origins, you know?
Some of the...
Right? Like,
Yeah. The capitalism grows out of a Christian worldview, but there is also a distortion of capitalism.
Sure. But I mean, it's like what I see happening right now though with, there's distortions to everybody's. And what people I think do is take the distortions of capitalism and then fight that. And it's like, yeah, but I don't agree with that either. And I'm a capitalist.
Right.
Right.
But I think,
but then ain't nobody taking the distortions of Marx and being like, you know, right. Like why the attack on capitalism?
Yeah. But I think though that there's a laissez-faire capitalism.
Oh, who?
That
say it to me like I'm three, Jason.
That there's an understanding of capitalism that has been separated from
biblical
ethics.
I agree.
Or not even biblical ethics, from a biblical metaphysic. That
explain that.
So the laissez-faire capitalism.
Why do I feel like me and you about to be opposed to each other on this? Go ahead.
Laissez-faire capitalism grew up at the same time of Darwinism.
Laissez-faire meaning a false form of
laissez-faire meaning whatever goes. So
but that was okay, fair enough.
So that you could have an economics that was different that was separate, that was no longer in a category of moral philosophy. Right. So
right. But and so maybe okay.
So whatever is best will rise to the top, and but that there weren't the limitations of morality, and so it was basically survival of the fittest applied to economics. How do we know what's the fittest? Well, they're the ones that survived, and so
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so it's the same. And that you had the invisible hand of the market, either blessing or cursing.
Okay, you know what I see happening to this already as we start talking about capitalism is the same thing that I see happening as it relates to when we talk about metaphysics. There is the first thing you want to understand is God is God, and there's a separation between you and Him.
Right.
It's God and creation.
Yeah.
Right?
So everything happening in economics is related to God as creator, not and there's no way to manipulate the creator God.
Right.
And so but the God of the economy, the invisible hand, is what. So the Enlightenment, as they tried to basically take this understanding of economics and separate it from the Christian worldview. That the idea was, well, we've got the invisible hand of the market that is blessing and cursing.
And this is what I was saying to your point just a moment ago, is that we've already usurped and moved into that top tier of false god.
Right, exactly.
Right, we already have idolatry in the system as soon as we do that.
But that idol is the same idol behind behind evolution, behind Darwinian evolution. It's just a disagreement on what is the most important thing to the idol. It's not a disagreement on which idol. Right. So, and the right took off with one version of that with that idol, with one version of an eschatology, and the left took off with that idol and another version of the eschatology, but they agreed on the idol. So Darwinian evolution and laissez-faire capitalism don't actually disagree on the God of the system.
What they disagree on is how the God operates.
Yeah. So or what's the most important to the God and which direction he's going.
So both of them have a system and where there's this invisible hand that's but it seems though that the right still appeals to Christians in a unique way because of what?
Well, I mean, I think
because we don't appeal to the other side.
Well, there were times when the left was more appealing, than the right historically, but right now, I think it's because there is an ultimate free market sense, Christians still get room to operate. Right? You don't have you can say, well, let's give it time. We'll find out what happens one way or the other. In a Darwinian evolution sense, our narrative is a threat. But you do have people like Nietzsche who says, well, no, he's on the laissez-faire capitalist side, and you have him saying, well, no, Christianity is a threat because they offer a different source. They offer a different mythos, a different myth of the creation of the world that makes weakness valuable. And because Jesus won by being weak, and then he served the weak, and he protected the weak, and he said that's actually bad for capitalism.
So then let's just work through real quick, 'cause this is interesting. How does, if you hold to capitalism, it seems like weakness is a problem. It does seem like that.
Yeah.
Right. But inside what I want to argue for as a biblical form of economics, even weakness has its strengths.
Yeah.
Right. And so it doesn't have to be the thing that doesn't produce. I think some people think about capitalism. I guess you have to define weak in some of this, but weakness doesn't produce a value for everybody in the market, where I think you can see, even in other countries, someone who has the ability at home to produce something of value for another person, even though they might not have legs, can produce amazing quilts. So their value, is in how they choose to love their person who doesn't have a blanket. Their value is choosing how to love a person who doesn't have the abilities they even have. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's what they provide and the blessing that they give to others and what they make or what they create has massive value. Because they're made Imago Dei.
And I think
right
that you're already assuming a particular definition of money that's not always assumed by everyone, where that money is a way of you pay somebody because you're saying you're adding value to my life. And so here,
I hadn't even got to the money part yet. I was just thinking of the goods that a person has around them. I believe that God naturally places people around a certain set of things, a certain set of goods, so that they can love somebody else with whatever it is they have in front of them.
Right. But
so,
but there are people that even that they can't, right? as Christians, we see somebody, that's in a wheelchair that they, they're mentally retarded. They don't have the use of their limbs, all of that. We look at them and we say, still have value.
Right. Because they're made Imago Dei.
Right. And I remember sitting in a church service once, and the pastor's son has no use of his arms, no use of his legs, mentally retarded, and he would just kind of shout at random times during the service. And
charismatic?
And having this realization that I'm actually not that much different than him as we stand before God.
Yep.
What I'm doing isn't actually that much different than what he's doing.
Right.
That in terms of where do we sit, on
a scale
of value, we're actually at the exact same spot.
Yeah.
There's nothing that my worship brings to the Lord that is of more value than his worship, what his worship brings to the Lord.
Right.
And because of that creator-creature divide, and then because of the fact that Jesus in his incarnation is where our value as human beings is solidified, or in terms of how we know our value. Jesus became a man. The second person of the Trinity became a man, was incarnated. Then we can look at that and say his value, my value, all the same, and it's and that's where it's confirmed. So that and that is
so I'm putting a value on a human being beyond what they produce.
Right, beyond what they produce. Whereas there are, and this is something that, so Karl Marx explicitly says that the value of a person is measured by their wealth. Mm. Then he says, but because we know people are all equal, wealth should be equal. All right. So that understanding, though, that the value of a person is measured by their wealth, that the ontological value is measured by their economic value, is actually often made on the right as well. And in laissez-faire capitalism, they agreed on that. But they said, therefore, some people are just more valuable than others.
Now, something that, the amount of value that, or the amount of wealth that is produced from somebody who can't go out, who doesn't have access, look, guys who are stronger than women, there's some jobs that are harder to do. And so what they are able to do produces more, fruit,
right,
because of the amount of work that it takes to get something done. So there is this kind of balance between the value, the dignity of a human being. That's not changing anything at all.
Yeah.
But the amount of fruit that's produced from somebody who's actually able to go and seed the garden is different.
It's true.
Right?
But Karl Marx says that a prostitute is more valuable than a housewife because a prostitute makes more money.
Okay. I see, because in my situation, it's just because you go out and you're able to see the garden doesn't mean that person next to you doesn't, your family member who can't do that doesn't deserve or shouldn't be entitled to some way to still live.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's why Marxism has produced such violent movements throughout history, is because they actually don't agree, because they were working from a metaphysic that doesn't believe that. So as Christians, we back our metaphysic up all the way to the triune God.
Yeah.
Right. God is one and he's three at the same time, right? So we don't have problems with unity and diversity all existing within one another. Adam is made in the image of God. Eve is made in the image of God. And then we're told they were the image of God. They together were the singular image of God. So the Hebrew, if you track the singulars and the plurals, there's not a problem even within the unity and diversity of the human race, because God is unity and diversity, and we are made in his image. But he is also...
So we can have those paradoxes and
so
totally
we can have
be
those
fun.
paradoxes and celebrate them.
Yeah.
Right? And say, well, who's more the image of God, the husband or the wife?
Yes.
Chesterton, a great poem. He set the sun. He's talking about husbands and wives. He says, "You set the sun beside the moon, and some damn fool will come along and say better." Right? It's like, say which is better, the sun or the moon? And you say, well, this is stupid. That's not that's not the distinction you make in that sort of situation.
Well, because that's a metaphysical problem too. Because it's just like, well, what is the sun for?
Right. Yeah.
Is it for what the moon is for? Well, no,
not at all. And
which is really interesting. It really does come down to metaphysics at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I'm
over
realizing,
and over. Yeah. So, but then what the mistake that Karl Marx makes is also a Trinitarian heresy. Right. He's making an error, a metaphysics error, by drawing his metaphysics from a God besides the triune God, because the Father and the Son have a relationship in which the Son submits to the Father. He is over the Father. We call it the economic Trinity, right? They have that the household relationship of the Trinity is the Father is over the Son, and then the Son and the Father and the Son together send the Spirit. So, does the submission of the Son make him less God? Absolutely not.
We don't. It's funny because I've realized that, again, this is the Trinity, so it transcends even our ability to grasp all of it. Yeah. But we don't have categories for the idea that submission means equal.
Yeah, exactly. That you can be, that one can submit.
Right.
And you see this in a lot of, when you get Trinitarian heretics, that get any sort of foothold and create cults and things, almost always they go to moments like, then Jesus submitted to the Father, and say, see, how could he be God? Right? Because the Father is more powerful than him. So, well, no, that's not, but that's a particular understanding of the economic relationship and in its relation to the ontological relationship. So the Father and the Son, ontologically, in their being, are both equally fully God. Right? There's not one that is more God than the other. There's no inequality in their economic relationship. The Father, the Son willingly submits himself to the Father. The Father lives his life in such a way that he's giving his life completely and fully to the Son and the Spirit. Jesus is giving his life away to the Father and the Spirit. So you have this understand, the Spirit is doing the will of the Father. He's doing the will of the Son. He's the Spirit of Jesus, but he's not less ontologically. That is the error that Karl Marx, he looked at the economy of the world, and he said, well, some people are above others in their economic relationship, but because we know they're not better, more human, we've got to flatten everything out. We have to fix this problem of economic relationships in which there are some that have more and others that have less. There were folks on the other side that agreed with Marx on the ontological economic mistake, that metaphysically, and they said, well, they called it laissez-faire capitalism. They said, well, no, I just am better. That's why I'm above you and you're below me. And then you had Darwin come along and write on the origin of the species. And Darwin come along and say, well, look, white people are in control and they're in charge, and then people with this skin color are lower than them, and this skin color are lower, and then you get all the way down to the Eskimos at the bottom, I think is who we put at the very bottom. Right? And he said, so therefore there's an ontological reality that is being represented by the fact that the white people are at the top, right? They are the superior master race, right? And then post-Enlightenment, everybody bought into that, right? And so you had master race
how did that
thinking everywhere.
So was that because of the growth of the West? Is that because of at that time you have The West is growing. It is becoming a massive power already at that point. You know, what made people buy into that with so much history production? I mean, you had the Spaniards, you had a whole bunch of other nations of brown folks who had produced the world's goods and beauty all the way up until this point. How did anybody really buy into that idea if that wasn't even the evidence on the ground? Well, hold on. That's not even fair to ask anymore after 2020, to be honest with you.
I mean, I think, you know, the serpent was the subtlest of all the beasts of the field. You know, he comes along and he says, man, aren't you so much better than them? Like, you look at what they do and look how ridiculous that is. 'Cause, I mean, in the Middle Ages, people read the travel logs of Marco Polo, and he'd go visit the East and he'd come back and they would read the travel logs and be so excited to hear about how different people were.
Right.
You didn't have the post Enlightenment. So much of Enlightenment philosophy came down to power and how do we grasp after power? How do we retain it? How do we get power over nature?
That's nothing new.
It isn't anything new, but it is. As the scientific knowledge does give us a certain mastery over nature that we didn't have before, I do think there's just metaphysical arrogance that sets in.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think I've seen from the past year, especially since the whole 2020 thing, I know more about medicine and sicknesses and virology than I ever have wanted to know. And I realize we don't even know how to synthesize the science that we have in front of us at the basic level. I mean, seriously, in one sense, we have people talking about if you don't put on a mask, then you won't be able to survive the next year without getting this disease.
Yeah.
Also, that boy, it's a girl now. And so your medicine, I mean, seriously, like and so the ability to be able to synthesize the data on the ground has always been a problem for us. And so you would just think by common natural sense how evolution was able to have a foothold inside of some of the most basic forms of economics, even though it didn't read that way in nature at all. The general revelation didn't read like that. For us to buy into it, we just have to be completely blinded.
Well, I don't know if there was... We lost the expectations that things would synthesize, right? The expectation that the world will make sense went away. So
that was before. That's why evolution took.
That's why evolution took a foothold in the first place. That you have you no longer have an expectation that you get enough knowledge and the whole thing's going to fit together and begin to make sense. And as that goes away, you start hunting for a new mythos. You know,
this is so funny. So as soon as you start denying God and what he tells you, right, then you open the door for idolatry to come in and fill that spot. And you're like, oh, look, this should work. This is
right. Mm-hmm. So, and you have attempts to hold on to it with deism and those sorts of things. But, once you start slipping down the garbage chute,
good luck getting back up.
Good luck getting back up.
So I really want to take a little deeper dive into capitalism, because I think everybody right now, we see critical race theory, intersectionality, and we see all these liberal ideas, and we say, yeah, not us at all. We're going to stick with capitalism. But like the conversation we've been having, our metaphysic is so broken, and our since we are steeped so much inside of Gnosticism,
right? Yeah.
We don't even see that our own system that we really hold to itself might be pretty broken.
Right. Yeah.
So let's just, inside of capitalism, I think I don't think about it like this because I'm thinking very much of a Christian ethic.
Right, yeah.
I think theonomically. So I'm thinking, okay, how do we love our neighbor in this? I don't hear a lot of people talk about capitalism like that, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I want to make a great product that loves my neighbor exactly the way they need, so that they can be able to do what they need to do and honor God in that. And there's joy in that. I watch guys who are there's a guy who is Axe and Anvil. He's on Instagram, and he is a blacksmith. Now, you don't see a lot of blacksmith, but I love following this guy because when I follow him, he loves his work, and he makes these things that take lots of time, and yet they have immense value to the person who grabs them and uses them, and that becomes, his lifestyle is to make hard things that people don't make anymore for certain uses that a lot of people don't do. And he loves that particular group of people to make those tools. And it's amazing to watch. And we do it all the time on Instagram or Facebook. We watch these videos where guys are sitting there taking an old car, right, and restoring it. And we're like, wow, that's amazing. And I think it's the internal reaction of, look at him bringing something dead to life and bringing beauty to it for a purpose, right? And, or taking something that's really basic, transform it into something that's magnificent, right? Beginning, middle, and end. And so we like to, which is creation, right? Even all the way to the post-millennial. So we love that. And then, so with capitalism, I don't know if people are holding those same concepts of blessing for your neighbor inside of, do you?
Yeah. I think it's often, it's not there's not a substantive desire to serve our neighbor that is flowing out in our work. Right. And so, if you are defining what is a biblical economic, it would be something like, my work adds value to people's lives as I serve them with the skills God gave me. Mm-hmm. And money is the way that we express that appreciation. Yeah. You've added $22 worth of value to my life, right? Mm-hmm. And then that work that as added value to other people's lives, you can express to people that have added value to your life that same amount of
so we're so you have $22. Is this enough for you to make more of this so that you can continue to add value to what I'm doing?
Am I adding value to people's lives?
It's so funny because if you've ever had something good, you go out to a restaurant, you have a good steak.
Yeah.
And when you have that steak, it satisfies you or whatever it is in such a way, something you purchase, that the price tag almost feels like you're getting a deal.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, oh my goodness.
So this restaurant in Spokane that my wife and I go to, and you go, we haven't been since before COVID, but you go in and you'd say, okay, we have $40. And you just give the chef $40. And then he takes that and decides what he can give you for $40. And I always walk out of there feeling like I ripped this chef off, right? Like you go in and you're like, I can't believe we only spent $40 on what he gave. So you get like,
and the chef is back there like, oh my goodness, did I give them enough? Like,
so then I go and it drives my wife nuts because my wife is very private and I'm like, go stick my head through the window into the.
Are you good?
And we're like, that was amazing. Like, I'm sitting there and I saw the chef come walking out, and my wife says, he goes over to the bar and he sits down, and my wife says, you have to wait until I'm outside.
So you can like, talk to him so I don't feel bad.
And she knows, like, I see him and I'm like, oh, I'm going to go over, and I just because I want to express my appreciation, like, because there's something so much. It's not like McDonald's, although
it serves a different purpose.
Yeah, it serves a different purpose, but there's a personal transaction where he chose what he chose for me, the food specifically. Here's what that's going to get you, and it becomes this loving. This expression of the way God is with us. Mm-hmm. And there's so many opportunities for that. And when capitalism goes wrong, there often is still space for those people that are acting that way.
Mm-hmm. It has that built into the system.
It has that built into the system still. But
It feels like
it can have
republicanism.
a dehumanizing effect.
Yeah.
Culturally.
Well, it can't live that long in God's world and survive. Like,
Right.
Things need to repent and follow God, or they're going to die.
Or they need to continually die to be raised again.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And so, you
didn't like the way I said that.
No.
Why not?
Because for things to live, they have to be constantly dying. That's the kind of world it is. So repentance isn't a way of avoiding death. It's a way of choosing the death that leads to life.
Interesting.
Right, yeah.
Why didn't you say that? Because, that's actually what I meant. What I meant is because if you're going to walk and live in step with God, something in you has to die. Repentance is the putting off of something, right? And leaving it there and then going and follow along. Right?
Yeah.
That's what I meant.
I think I know what you meant. That's why I laughed rather than correct.
I didn't mean it Baptist. That's what
Baptist theology holds on strong.
Yeah, I didn't mean it in the Baptist way. I was very Presbyterian, but I'm glad you.
It's like the squid in.
Say that again. Everything needs to be. I'm going to talk right over that because it gives so much trouble. But in order for it to live, it needs to continually die.
Right. Yeah. Jesus says that the way to life is to constantly die, right? Is to constantly be giving the life away, and to choose the graves that God says have doors out the back to new life, right? It's not as if you get to pick to not die.
You're gonna die. Period.
You're gonna die.
Yeah.
And so, but there's a death that leads to life.
Pick the graves that have the doors out back to life.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a hard reality.
Oh man, it's so hard.
And it's not one that's prominent inside of Christendom right now. Because you're right. I think that when people are seeing the situation maybe we'll talk about this in a second too, as far as like the vaccines, and they see what's coming. Some people really do see what's coming, and they're hoping, we've talked about this a little bit, they hope that big wave of judgment that's coming, they can repent and not have to go through it. Right. But that's actually not how it's going to happen.
Well, it's not. I think there's, the death is on its way, right? You can see that the tide is coming in, and when you try to say, well, I'll just resist the tide coming in. I used to surf, and you get a big wave coming. And if you try to just fight over it, you're just destroyed by it. Right? That
kind of like a rock.
Yeah. You have
jump on the rock.
As the flood comes in, God's floods have a cleansing effect, but they also have a way of forcing his people onto the rock, right? And if we refuse to climb up there, he's like, well, then I just need to send more water, right? Yeah. I need to send more flood until you're up on the rock. But it's because God's floods, as they come over us, bring new life, right? So Psalm 42, it's as the deer pants for the water, so my soul pants after you, right? So. But then David explains how he got to that point in his life, and he describes it as God's floods came in and held me down until I drowned. And now my heart longs for
I died.
Him. Right? Yeah, I died. Right?
That
the only way to that properly ordered desire was that death. It's
Jonah
2
too.
Corinthians. Yeah, Jonah.
Right.
Jonah.
He died that's death in the well, right?
And what's funny is, Jonah 4:2, he says, he preaches and he says, and then they all repent and turn. And he says, I knew that you would do that, Lord. You're always so merciful. Right. But what's funny is he had preached. I mean, when he opened his mouth, before in Jonah 1, when he's fleeing the Lord, he goes down to Joppa, down into the ship, down into the sides of the ship, down onto his bed to sleep. And then they come and get him, they bring him up. And the first thing that when he opens his mouth that happens is a bunch of heathens repent.
Right.
So
Right.
he's trying to get away from converting heathens.
He did it again. God, you did it again.
But
Right.
the only way to do it is to keep his mouth completely shut,
So I want to go back to,
which is what the church has been trying to do.
I was going to say,
keep their mouth completely shut.
well, we might be a little worse than Jonah. I don't even know if we know that God is as kind as he is. You know what I mean?
That's
Like
true.
that we might be a little.
It's true.
Otherwise, anyway, I want to go back to capitalism. So
Yeah.
the brokenness in the system right now, how is it separated? So we talked about what a Christian ethic would look like.
Yeah. Well, the way that God tempers capitalism and keeps it in its place is by instituting non-capitalistic institutions in the world, right? So the church is not a capitalist institution. America has not treated the church that way. In fact, that's one of the reasons that I don't think that they're...
Up until recently.
I mean,
Yeah.
so I've heard a story recently of a pastor that was a church planter that he was coming in and they're like, well, here's your salary. And he's like, no, I just want 10% of the tithe every morning. That way, if I grow the church, I can make more money. Right. And you're like, flee from that pastor. I mean,
Well, she should be flogged.
yeah. So,
What did he just mean?
right. So yeah, that's, and they were like, oh, that's right. That's how that will encourage him to work harder.
Gives
And
him
that
incentive.
Gives him incentive. But money is not the incentive that runs the church.
That's the kind of guy that won't die for his flock, though.
Oh, absolutely. Right. He's a hireling.
He's gonna run.
The wolf shows up and everybody says, go get it, Pastor. Where'd he go?
There's a scene in Batman, I wish I could pull it up, where the Joker, you remember the Joker walks inside the room with all the gangsters?
Yeah.
And he's getting that interview from the
Yeah, he
guy.
says, let me show you a magic trick.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
He walks in and they're on the kitchen, whatever, and they're talking to a TV. He's like, he is a squealer. I know a squealer, you know? That's how I feel about that pastor.
Right.
Like, that's no.
No, exactly. And you know, the early America, they understood that. That's why there's no taxes, right? Because it's outside the capitalist realm, right? It's an institution that is not capitalist.
So it understands his metaphysics.
Yeah. So poor pastors that have real authority in the world is one of the ways that God historically has hemmed capitalism in, right? Given real pastors that have taken vows of poverty. I mean, literal or just the way it generally works out. And then giving them real authority in the world, right? So that hems capitalism in and says, well, capitalism is only supposed to function within the realm of households.
I don't like that. I don't like pastors taking a vow of poverty. Just don't like that one.
Not a.
But I see what you mean.
Yeah.
But
So historically, sometimes it was a vow of poverty. That was always in response to when the church got this out of whack and became a capitalist institution.
Pendulum swung too far the other side.
Well, the reform movements retrained the desires of the church through vows of poverty. And I don't think there needs to be vows of poverty. But that is how it's sort of like paganism detox.
I get that. I just think that what we see, what ends up happening in the good that's trying to do, because we see this so many times in Christendom, right? Like, or let's just go for the civil rights movement. Bad thing, right? Like that happened. So we need the civil rights movement. Great thing to try and fix. And now all of a sudden we get anti-discrimination bills.
Yeah.
Sometimes we got to discriminate.
Well, I mean,
between man and woman, right?
Yeah, we need. And I think what's interesting too is that's a way of you go to the feds and you say, "Hey, you're using your power to mistreat us," and then you say, "Okay." They say, "Oh, you're totally right. I'm so sorry. We'll just take a little bit more power. Trust us with it this time." Right?
Yeah, and we'll fix it.
We'll fix it. We're like, well, I think there's a certain point at which you walk away from the abusive boyfriend.
Yeah, right. Well, and my point for saying that was that if you don't go and do things in a biblical form and biblical way, then you're going to get something on the opposite side of that becomes the same version of what you were just fighting, right?
Yeah,
so like civil rights movement, like great for it, but then what we end up opening the door for now is something that was completely the same thing on the opposite side of where we were then.
Right.
So now we don't understand anybody's ability to have any autonomy to do anything, right?
Because what we did is we said the problem with the federal government being so oppressive is that I'm not in charge.
That's what it was. Yeah. And so then rather than understanding, which goes right to our conversation on economics, that the economic structures are not the federal government's responsibility anyway.
Right.
Those are between individuals, right? And so that is, that's one of the things that we keep missing out. And that was love so far. This conversation has been not talking about the federal government as it relates to economics, because that's not what they're, that's not what they're, called to do. It's been individuals engaging with each other. Yeah. And so this goes back to the pastor situation, because, you don't muzzle the ox that's treading out the grain, right? Like you let him feed off of what he's treading, because he needs to, in order to be able to do his job.
Well, and Paul says to show double honor to those that preach the gospel. And so you show them honor, but you also pay them.
Right.
Because they,
that's how we communicate honor.
That's how we communicate honor, that we communicate that you're doing something of value. But it's not an exchange in the same sort of way.
Right. Because the truth is, there couldn't be an exchange that would amount to the value of a soul.
Exactly. 100%.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
So
the church functioning as a non-capitalist institution is one of the things that hems in a biblical economic, because it keeps it in its place. But then the other thing is that the law of God has a whole a way of keeping people from squeezing their resources beyond in a way that keeps the poor from being able to have access to resources.
Give an example of that.
So when they're
Gleaning?
told to not glean the corner of their fields, it is a way of saying, look, this piece of property you're the steward of on behalf of the landlord, the God who owns it all. You're the steward of this piece of property, and all of the other citizens of the landlord, basically any other person that walks past, is a citizen of the same landlord. And the purpose of your field is to serve those citizens. And that when you don't you don't glean the corners of the field, it's a reminder of the purpose of capital. It's a reminder of the purpose of the means of production. This is and it's a way of hemming in the capitalism to its proper place in society, or its proper understanding.
And one thing that's interesting about that too with gleaning is that not only was it there to protect the poor so that they would have something and doing what it's supposed to do in functional society, it actually was easier in a lot of ways for the people who were doing the work not to have to do the edges of their field and some of the things that they were doing, right? And so I was just talking to a farmer out here, and this is a little different. It's not, but because of the way that their setup is not doing the edges, they naturally allow gleaning.
Right.
Their machinery doesn't do edges.
Right. But there would be a way of saying, like, I can't get the edges, but I'm going to set my dogs on anyone
who does. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Well, and it creates more work to have to do some of that because of where they are. It's a little harder, so, but it also, it serves two purposes. My point is that it serves the purpose of the person who has the field, right? Someone comes and blesses them by doing some of the harder work, creates work for the people in the environment, and everybody gets blessed equally from just obeying God's laws on this.
Right. So, I think a good example of how that might work in the modern world is I have the barbershop where I go. You go in and there's always 1, 2, sometimes 3, 12 to 14-year-old boys hanging out in the back corner. And after you're finish getting your hair cut, they pop up and they sweep the floor. And then every time they do that, they'll get a little bit of a lesson. They get a couple bucks from the barber, and then they are there gleaning. The barber could say like, "No, I need that extra $2. I can't. I need that. I'll do it myself. I can't afford you."
That's a good point. There's not a lot of gleaning in capitalism, is there?
Not the way we think of it.
Not the way we think of it. Yeah.
Right. We're always looking for every advantage, but that goes back to that same mentality that survival of the fittest says, that it's all about gaining advantage over others. That's how you survive. That's how you grow. Whereas God says, well, no, what's the source of it all? Like, I'm the landlord. I'm the one. I'm the one that's taking care of you. And why am I taking care of you? Well, so that you can serve me and worship me. And how do you do that? By serving my image in your neighbor, right? So you can return your service to me in my neighbor, in your neighbor, because he's made in my image, and that is the purpose and the point of it all. And if you stop doing that, then the blessing goes away, right? So that's another faithfulness. So that the world exists. You've got this covenant that God has made with us, and faithfulness to the covenant. You keep the covenant by faith, and then you work out of that faith. Leads to blessings. We do have a temptation to turn around and say, "Look at the kingdom that I've built."
That gets you dead.
Hey, you and
not the kind of dead you want.
Right. Rather than saying thank you. But what our thankfulness looks like is not gleaning the corners of the field and making sure that there's somebody comes along and they're poor, and you say, well, hey, you can go over there and glean that corner of the field and make sure you got the food you need.
So, I mean, and I'm kind of using capitalists in two different ways, but I'll try not to do that in this one. I'll use it like this. Biblical form of economics is not a slot machine like we've treated capitalism.
Right.
And which is
because there's not a blind hand behind it all.
Right. So we see the principles of reaping and sowing, but what we miss is that there's covenant behind that with the true God.
Right. Yeah.
So when there's covenant in relationship, then it don't matter if you reap and sow all you want to, you can still have a cursed product because you don't honor God in what you do. So it doesn't, just because you put seed in the ground, right? We're doing this right now. We are putting seed in the ground, we're getting out fruit, and it's cursed.
Right.
And we're just thinking, oh, maybe we just make some better soil, and so we use all the fertilizer we can. We can put some more seed in the ground, it comes up, and it's still not cursed. And that's because this new bug came in, guys, that we're trying to take out. And so now we're going to go and just go to the scientists and get them to put a special kind of seed in the ground with this new special dirt, and it's cursed. And it's because while God is not a slot machine, there really is covenant relationship that we need to make sure we have inside of how we do business.
Yeah. And I mean, I think a good example is, in America, when let's say just for imaginative purposes, we are the wealthiest nation the world has ever seen in the history of time.
Yeah.
Even our poor people are fat, as Chris Rock famously said. Right. We and there shouldn't be any reason for everything to fall apart.
Right. Everything should keep. Yeah. If it's a slot machine, like
if it was
that.
a slot machine.
Yeah.
But then you look at the history you look at the unrepentant sin in the history of America. Walker Percy, in one of his novels, Love in the Ruins, he talks about America was given all the resources like no nation had ever seen, given opportunity like no nation was ever seen, and all it had to do was not take advantage of the powerless black man put in his hand.
Brother, you see, yeah.
And it was one small test. He said, and we failed so miserably.
Well, we failed on the Indians before we even got to that one.
Well,
Yeah.
Eventually with the relationship with the Native Americans is more complex than the relationship with black folks.
True, but
pretty much straightforward.
But I think though
we had just import slaves.
Yeah.
It's like, what? But remember how that was made illegal in like 300s? Like,
didn't end well at all.
No. So we're still we're reaping our unfaithfulness, which is eating up now the prosperity. Now, a lot of that prosperity came from the faithfulness of some of the people, right? But there was national sin that remained unrepentant. That we remained unrepentant, and we reap the fruits of that as well.
With a pseudo, or is it neo-capitalism? Would that be what did you call it earlier?
Oh, laissez-faire.
Laissez-faire.
Yeah.
Are we still laissez-faire? Or are we even worse now?
Well, we're fascists now. It's a whole different system. But
what do you mean?
That's where so fascism as an economic system, it is where the government intervenes and supports or doesn't support certain corporations and gives favor to certain corporations or sells favor to certain corporations in exchange for support of its power.
It's interesting because according to Romans 13, there is a part where the government absolutely is supposed to reward what is good. So, and I mean reward in the sense that it praises.
Yeah.
These are the, and so it seems like we've taken certain incentives that we probably shouldn't have taken and given them. And then so now when the left comes in, they're like, hey, so we've kind of abused it. Instead of saying like, this is a good thing to do, be like this, encourage these kind of companies who act this way. I don't know how that would look necessarily politically, but at least to say, way to go, be this way. And I thought for a while that the incentives to have kids was one of those things. I've changed my position on this, where the government's like, good job, great having kids, we're going to give you a tax break. It's like, time out. And I realized that it was a trap a little bit, because what's happened is now they've decided to bring in this world, what do they call it? The World Economic Paycheck. I can't remember how they. It just lost me that quick. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, world minimum income.
Yeah, exactly. Something. And so we're not trained for it here in America yet, right? We're not trained. That's not our thing. And what they've decided to do is to take that tax incentive. This is exactly what Biden and Romney have already came out and said, in order to get that world economic paycheck or whatever that they're doing. I just be so mad at myself when I listen to this. Like, what was it? Y'all know what it is. We're going to give you your tax credit on your kids and a paycheck every month from us.
Right.
And so this whole system's backwards anyway. But what they're doing is saying, okay, so now if you have, for me, I think my check would be like $4,500 or something like that. It's ridiculous. Yeah. And they would pay it out your every month so that you get used to getting this check at a particular time. So when they come in with that, paycheck, it's like, oh, I'm used to getting a check for $4,800 a month from the government. Where's my money?
Yeah. And what's crazy is how quickly we adjust.
Yes.
Right? So to depend upon it, so that anyone that comes along and says, hey, guess what? This actually isn't a good idea. Now looks like they're stealing. Right? Now they're just giving you some of your money back after
right.
At the same time they did that, they put a 50-cent a gallon tax on gas, right? So which of them is going to be?
Did that go through?
More? I don't know, but it was all
that was inside of their.
That was inside of the whole thing, right? So we're gonna. So which of those is going to actually offset the other? Well, there's no way that they're not going to end up taking more taxes while giving you some of it back, right? But the more of it that goes through their hands, the less of it that comes out.
Right, and that's not in their sphere to be able to operate in anyway.
Oh yeah, for sure. So, and besides the fact that,
but are they supposed to be saying like, okay, are they supposed to be incentivizing families now? And I'm like, well, no, because anything that the government incentivizes, in one way or another, if people figure out a way in human nature, sinful nature, to completely screw it up, right? So now if you say, hey, I've seen this happen so many times, they incentivize people to go and kill rats. Well, they create rat farms
right.
that make more rats, and then they go get their check from the government, and it's like, well, the government intended people to go kill those rats out there, not to produce them.
Right.
So whenever the government incentivizes something and rewards for it, sinful man figures out a way to.
Well, and even beyond that, one of the ways that the black family was attacked was this very means. Right, they go in and say, well, hey, look, we're going to give you help. If you get married, it goes away.
Yeah.
So
if they're single women
with a kid, you get this amount of help. If you get married, it all goes away.
So
because now that guy's got to.
And so we've had a lot of people's families that were split because of the fact it's like, well, we get more money if you're not here, so just go get a different address. Well, that's not good.
So you have the undermining of the family in the name of compassion, the undermining of the nuclear family is historically the best defense against poverty.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Everybody sees that.
Yeah,
everybody sees that.
And but that has been undermined in the name of defending people against poverty, and I think there are some people that are doing it on purpose. They are evil. There are other people that are foolish. They don't see what they're doing. They imagine a kid hungry, and they say, that's too painful. Because they see their own kids. They imagine a kid like their kid hungry somewhere, and they say, okay, I feel terrible. Here, take care of this. Just give them tax money. Right. But guilt makes us manipulable, and people have figured that out. And until we learn how to take our guilt and put it on Christ, we'll just continue to be easy to manipulate.
So the last year and a half, everyone is looking at what's going down around them, and they're realizing they need to make some decisions about how to live the next the rest of their lives in this new world.
Yeah.
Because after the coronavirus, we're living in a new world. I've realized the old world is gone.
Yeah.
Whatever was in that old world that I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, it's gone, and it's not coming back. We're actually, we probably should have saw signs of this, and I was talking about this on the show last week. After the Twin Towers went down, what Americans did, we gave away all of our freedoms for the Patriot Act, I believe it was, and we said, you can look at us, search us up and down, touch us, take our stuff, privately investigate us without us knowing about it, so long as you keep us safe.
Yeah.
We gave up all of our freedoms for safety, and that's not something you can do. Like, it's impossible. You just committed yourself to being a slave. That's what you just did.
Right.
And so everybody's trying to figure out how they move around in this new world, and you have a lot of people who are relocating their businesses, relocating how they live and work and who their new people are, because there's fault lines that they didn't see before. Their churches have exposed themselves for who they really are. And the way that we're thinking about doing business now is almost under the table, because you're getting forced vaccinations, you're getting forced into operate a particular way from in your local environments, and it's not from the federal government, just in your local governments. And so everybody's redrawing these districts and lines. And since we're redrawing these district and lines, how we need to be thinking about economics right now is kind of like a good reset. There's a great opportunity.
A great reset.
It's Jesus' reset, baby.
No, there's a huge opportunity, and I've been thinking about this a lot, and there's a couple of things. One, I think we need to look at things like Black Wall Street and the establishment of just a secondary economics, a side-by-side economics.
Come on now, you better say that again. So
and say, oh no, they were onto something, and understand the reason that you started, especially Jim Crow laws were evidence that black folks were becoming a threat to the majority economic. That they said, "Oh, we got to put them in the back of the bus."
Well, yeah, actually, I would even go before Jim Crow laws.
Yeah.
I think you got the red codes, you had black codes, right? So this is after, I think during the time of Reconstruction, 1867, right around that era, when we had the Colfax, Louisiana. That was the moment, I think, that turned everything. So you have black people voting for the first time, black Republicans get inside of office, and then white Democrats come in, burn down the place, and kill like 167 black people.
Right.
Actually more than 300 black people. Just execute them right then and there. And Grant has to send down the military, hold trials. No one's arrested. No one is tried for the murders. But from there, though, you get black codes. You had red coats, and then you get black codes, and then you get the you just said it.
Jim Crow.
Yeah. From that, you get Jim Crow, right? And so you're right. That threat, and that was 90 years before Martin Luther King, right? So you're right.
And that's evidence. So had black folks looked around and said, okay, we got freedom. Let's use it well. Let's build up an economics. They weren't given access to some of the historic economics, but they understood if I serve my neighbor well, that we can build our own economic system. They built a side-by-side economic system, and it was a threat. And so they tried to crush it.
Go ahead.
It was Master P, right, that said, wait, how much money are you offering me?
Yes.
How much are they making off me?
That's right. Master P went to Sony Records, and Sony offered him like $15-20 million when he did No Limit.
Yep.
And him and his brother walked out, and his brother was so upset at him, like, why would you do that? To turn down $15-20 million. He's like, if I'm making them $15-20 million,
how much are they making off of me?
How much are they making off of me?
Right. And just learn. I think we need to learn to think like that. And so, get some Ice Cube in there too, who looked at Eazy-E and said, but not with him. Right. he said,
and he was talking about the manager.
Yeah. Eazy-E and, the manager at the time, where Eazy was like, I'm going with this guy, and Ice Cube was like, I'm out, because the way you're living is going to lead to the gutter. Even if you're making money now, you're going to end up in prison or dead. And one of them ended up in prison. One of them ended up dead.
Jerry Heller.
Yeah. So so Ice Cube said, yeah, I'm creating my own economic atmosphere to live in, and
infrastructure,
the whole thing. But I'm not doing it with them because of their character. Right? So he was able to make a distinction within the economics and say, yeah, all the money in the world, like Easy's got, that leads to death is not worth it.
And I want to say, when you talk about Black Wall Street, the reason that story is really important, people need to spend a lot more time investigating that, because in Black Wall Street, so you had there was a few of them. I think there was another lynching like 1940s, but Black Wall Street is in the era 1919, 1920, that era. And so that is right after Reconstruction is over. It failed, right? It was a great time for a moment. We had black voting rights that existed. Black people in 1920 didn't have all the rights given to them that happened 40 years later, right?
But they didn't wait around for permission.
That's my point. Yeah. They built an economic structure that rivaled Wall Street to the point that it was called Black Wall Street on their own in a little town outside of Tulsa. And you know what I mean? And so for them to do that and to produce that kind of wealth, it shows that you don't have to have all the access you think you need to have in order to be able to be successful in God's world the way that He's designed it.
Right.
When you're faithful and loving your neighbor in particular ways, it became so crazy. And here's one of the things that was really interesting about Black Wall Street: just because they were being discriminated against didn't make them discriminate.
Right. And when they went to reinvest their money, you got Harlem Renaissance, right?
Right.
They also looked around and they said,
yes, who can we? Yeah.
we need.
That's good, Jason.
We need art. we need music, we need poetry. I mean, some of that poetry that came out of the Harlem Renaissance is some of the best poetry that has been produced on American land. And this
is why I'm a Reconstructionist. Seriously.
The true, one of the most important measures of whether or not there's wealth versus money. When you have wealth, then it supports the arts. When you just have money, you don't necessarily get arts. You had real wealth grow up in the black community, and that art ended up, I mean, really spreading throughout the whole world.
You know, and as you
can be in Korea and hear a gospel choir.
Well, this is why. From that, though, there's so many things connect. Wealth with it has culture. It's not just a finance. It has. This is something that's so important. Black Wall Street at that time in that era was not dealing with the lack of black families. Black Wall Street was built from husbands and wives and children and neighbors who had husbands and wives and children that had a culture. Right. And one of the things that I see so much that when I'm watching I'm gonna get in trouble on this one. When I'm watching people go to their school boards and these school meetings and all these women are getting up there fighting for their kids, I'm thinking to myself, where are the men, first of all? But what they just proved to me when they're going to these school boards is that they don't have a culture to fight against. Fight with, right? They have nothing, and they're up here at the school boards begging that because that's who they share their kids with.
Yeah. Right.
They got your culture right there, and you're asking them for a piece of it. Could you, at least while you have my kids, could you not teach them critical race theory?
Right.
Like, you're not even asking for the kid in caboodle.
Right. Yeah.
Like, while you have our kids there, me and my husband were wondering if it's possible that you not teach them critical race theory. It's like, them your kids.
Right. And schools are one of the institutions that passes down culture from generation to generation. They are passing down a culture.
Can't help but to.
Yeah, can't help.
That's what education is. Paideia.
Right. Exactly.
It is a culture.
Exactly. And so, if the church has depended upon somebody else to pass its culture down for way too long.
At least the last 150 years.
But here's the thing. If we say, well, we're going to build an alternate culture, one of the things we have to understand is that will land us in the back of the bus. Right.
But if you can't see, you're already back there. You know, I've always wanted to say this. It's like, here's my problem with my white friends. They have never not been in the front of the bus. So they have no idea, what that transition looks like. So it's happening all in front of them. And that's why they're like, what is going on here? Something is, it's like, everything's just shifted for you. And I'm trying to tell y'all, this leads to where we just came out of 60 years ago. It ain't that. No, it is. But you know what I mean? Like and I'm like, y'all, they doing this to y'all right now.
But this is another thing that did you watch Summer of Soul yet?
Yes.
Oh,
I did.
Was that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. We'll talk about that. We're going to be here for another 2 hours.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
When you realize what year that was.
Yeah.
You realize
know. Lost Malcolm.
I know. Right?
Lost Martin.
Like that, but you also realize that at that point, black culture was a juggernaut that was not being stopped. It was taking over.
And there was a fight for black culture then.
It was.
Yeah.
But how they won, they didn't go to the federal government and say, can we please have some access? They turned the back of the bus into the place where everybody wanted to be. Right. Until basically.
That's how they really won.
That's how they really won.
Yeah,
right?
that's how they really won.
Right. And so pretty soon.
You're saying they won with a culture.
They won with a culture, right?
Yeah.
So that they had the best music. They had the music, the dancing, the poetry, the church.
But
music.
that all came out of struggle. Like that's the thing too.
And that's why Christians because Christians want to avoid that, we won't find our way through.
Because Christians want to avoid the struggle.
Yeah.
Because right now, Christian culture, I don't know how to define it anymore. Right? You know what I mean? I don't know what it. You know, it's
bland.
Yeah.
Because it's
not modular too.
But it's not resurrection culture. Because it hasn't died.
That was one of the things that watching Summer of Soul was really interesting to me. They had more Christian bands up there than secular bands.
I know.
And the secular bands, I think I told you about this, was kind of like Juneteenth. Like Juneteenth, man, everybody went crazy over Juneteenth. Like, oh, Juneteenth, that's how, critical race theory. I'm like, man, people have been celebrating Juneteenth forever. Shut up.
Yeah.
Like it's not critical. And we always had crazy uncle at Juneteenth. Like that. And Nina Simone was the crazy uncle.
Yeah.
Like, black people, are you ready to kill if necessary? All the black people are like, yeah.
Like,
somebody get her off stage.
But when she sang.
Yeah, but she was singing angry, and I think that, and there was a reason for that.
But you listen to young Nina Simone, and you listen to her sing, and people remember that,
and they're attached to it.
They remember, but they understand that. Yeah, okay, she's right now. This maybe isn't great that she's wondering, should we murder everybody on stage, right?
Maybe it's a bad idea to tell her what y'all about to do.
But at the same time, they're like, but we know how much she has blessed us throughout the years with her voice.
Yeah.
And the sacrifices that she's made.
They gave her a grace.
So like she deserves to continue to be honored, even though at that moment
it wasn't her best moment.
Yeah, it wasn't her best moment, right?
Yeah. No, that's good.
Because you got to take her life as a whole and not just those moments.
Yeah.
Because that's how I would want to be treated.
Yeah. There is, the complication for me in that is who was the real person at that point? Like who were you really? Did you mature and this is the fruit of what you really were and we just didn't know that?
Or was she just being taken advantage of?
Or was she just abused in such a way that is, I'm bitter right now and that's coming out? That's hard to know sometimes in those moments.
And that's why you got to always
have a lot of grace.
Have a lot of grace. Well, and take, interpret everybody's life, not in snapshots. I mean that's so hard now.
Okay, I'm willing to do that so long as the people who use Nina Simone as a reason to be violent don't do the same thing. Right?
Oh yeah, no.
Say, hey, remember what she said in Summer of Soul?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you need to take that in a snapshot.
Right.
Okay? Yeah, that wasn't Nina's full career.
Yeah, 100%.
So, but yeah,
and all of it. I mean, it's the same because there are people that you look at it and you say, oh, that snapshot's nice. And then you step back and you're like, oh, but look at the movie.
Right. No, that's true.
Right. And then there's people that it's the other way around.
Yeah. It's funny. That's Malcolm X is kind of like that for me. He's like, there's a bigger, one of the things that Summer Soul.
And the movie, the TV show Lost, I think. Oh. You've got each character.
Here you go.
Each character is given an episode where they're a good guy and a bad guy. And the only difference is editing, right? They edit the person into a good guy one episode and the bad guy. That's wisdom, right?
Yeah, and it tells you something about a story. Mm-hmm. What they did was create an environment in laws where all we got is each other,
right?
And so
it mattered. Is this character a good guy or a bad guy? Mattered to the limit,
right?
Because we're stuck on an island.
And it matters to the moment.
Right.
So are you going to give your belt as a tourniquet so this person can live? You know what I mean? Yeah. Even though we know now from the past that you kill everybody you run in contact with.
That show was brilliant.
And so it made
a couple of seasons.
Yeah. There's some ambiguous ethics in some of this that was like, I don't know. I think we should have a tribunal. Get rid of this guy. just saying that. Yeah. So I get one of the things that Summer of Soul though was really interesting was if you watch that, one thing that I've appreciated about singing Psalms is here's a good example. I'm going to come back to Summer of Soul. Yeah. Toby did a news brief recently talking about all the hurt and harmful things that are happening over in Afghanistan. The people who helped and served us as we're trying to do something we shouldn't have been trying to do. Mm-hmm. and they've given their lives. You know, you got 20-year-old people over there who only know an American presence, haven't had a Taliban who've, you know, influence, haven't had an Islam influence, you know, mostly, American influence has been there, and they've given their lives to see a different world. And then that was all just kind of taken away from them. And so you got babies that are getting tossed over barbed wire fences, and some of them landing in the fences, and, you know, the people who are getting their arms cut off and IDs burnt to their chest, and women who are getting their eyes plucked out. And you just, there's so many, it's just horrible. Right. And then at the end of his news brief, he ends with a psalm. Actually, it wasn't a psalm. It was a hymn that I think, to the word, and the comforting truth of that song put all of that in a context for me where it was like, God will be just.
Yeah.
He will judge the wicked, and your day is coming. And it gave my heart a hope and a comfort that before hearing all that mess, it was like, what do you do with this? And the hurt from everything that happened in Afghanistan, that's going on in Afghanistan, while, you know, I'm not in the middle of it, I don't know what those people are really going through, and I can't speak to it, but I know God's going to be just in it. Watching the Summer of Soul and watching a people sing the truths about God that they knew in the middle of their struggle was like a war chant for God to come. And then when he does, there will be victory. When justice comes, we will be free. We will have, somebody will judge rightly about us. And that was in their music in such a way that it made me think, my goodness, the modern church doesn't have those type of songs in their repertoire anymore.
Right.
And God has given us a book. And this goes back to culture, right? The culture from dealing with so much hurt produced these hurts. And like, how does God deal with these hurts? What's the struggle through these hurts? How do we, and it became, that's our soul music was. Yeah. It was like our souls are crying out on this, R&B and blues. That's what that was. And the church has neglected to sing those type of songs anymore. So now when something happens and we see injustice in the world, we don't have a song to sing. Yeah.
And I mean,
because we have no culture. Right. That's, you know,
but and you look at the root of all those different kinds of music was the spirituals.
Yeah. Oh,
singing,
yeah.
Right?
Negro spiritual.
So
absolutely.
You have the spirituals born out of the kind of suffering that you say, well, what's there left to do if there's no God? Right? Then we're in trouble. And so crying out, Lord, are you there? Let justice roll down. In the modern church, the word judge is a negative. That's how soft our lives
Come on
have been,
now. Yeah.
Right? We say, do you really want God to judge? And everybody's like, no.
Right.
That's how soft we've become, is because the word judge is, you want a judge to come, right?
Vindication.
Because because a judge comes to put things right. The book of Judges is not a book of somebody coming through and saying mean things about you that make you feel bad, right? But that's like that's the worst that we can imagine in the modern church is, well, we don't want to make people feel bad. But it's because we have sheltered ourselves from the needs, the need for the world to be put right. And there's lots of ways we've done it, but
we still must have it really nice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
we absolutely do.
We don't know how nice we have it still. And so, I'm realizing when I'm going through here in Moscow, watching Gabe get arrested and singing psalms, I realized, in that moment, like I needed something to sing. Yeah. Because I needed God to vindicate the situation. Right. Because I could right now, but that wouldn't be justice. That wouldn't be righteous. And if God's going to vindicate the situation, I'm going to be judging the process from handling it wrong too.
Right.
And so,
we're told to save room for the wrath of God. Not because God's wrath is just and restorative when ours isn't. Yeah.
So so with everything shifting, we have a great opportunity in front of us to be able to rethink how we are doing economics, right? So right now with if you we've kind of been talking about capitalism. What are some of the things that we need not to take in with us as we're moving, into this new transition from kind of this mixed bag of evolutionary capitalism?
Yeah. I mean, I think a big part of it is so much of the way we think about, we don't think about wealth generally very clearly, right? And so, I've been doing some speculative real estate development and working on a project up in Spokane, and it's amazing talking to real estate people how many of them are not concerned with owning wealth as long as they get some of the bank's money. Right? If everything continues in the direction it is, we're not going to have access to the bank's money anymore. And if our habitual way of thinking about wealth is in terms of money rather than in terms of
slave mentality,
where we say, well, I'm going to just keep leveraging against the bank's money and see how much of the bank's money I can get into my account in the process of leveraging. That is not we're not thinking in terms of wealth, because that's not something that if you lose access to the banks, you lose access to the way that to the way of getting a hold of the money. If instead you're building up means of production of something that serves your neighbor, if it comes to trading in eggs or something,
you're always gonna have a neighbor, right?
Yeah,
somebody's
always
gonna have a neighbor,
right? You might not have access to the bank, but you'll always have a neighbor, and that's it. But it's such a different way of thinking that you're not thinking, how do I get mine? You think, who can I serve? Who can I bless?
That's so good, man. Keep going. I'm sorry. I'm just thinking about.
I think that's a big part of the mentality that needs to shift and change, and it's such a it's easy to shift, and then it's also just easy to think, I need to. What do I have permission to do, and what do I not have permission to do? How can I? You have to get a permit to cut hair,
But do you though?
But do you? Right?
Do you
yeah.
though?
And there is a way of developing that servant mentality. How can I serve my neighbors? That doesn't need permission from from the federal government to begin serving.
That's really good. One of the things that I'm trying to really teach my kids is I had them go do work for people and that would normally get paid. It's like, I just want you to learn to work, but I also want you to learn, what does that person really need? Right. At the end of the day, when you get done, there's things that they ask you to do, but that's not always what they really need.
Right.
How do you serve that person? How do you really give them what they need? And if you can't figure that out, then I don't want you to take a paycheck from them yet.
Right.
Right. Like, yeah, anybody can do this right here.
Yeah.
But how do you, and sometimes what they really need is this to be done. And then for you to think another step on top of that to bless them even more. Like, so what do they really need?
Yeah. Well, this is C.S. Lewis talks about, that, a guy that goes out, he says a guy that goes out, looking for a woman at the bars is not actually looking for a woman. He's looking for, a pleasure that a woman happens to be the necessary apparatus to. And then he says, and you don't keep the pack, or you don't keep the package after you finish smoking the cigarettes.
Right.
But he says, you're not actually, if you were looking for a woman,
yeah,
then you would go out a different way, right? You would go out thinking, what does it look like to serve a woman? What does it look like to love a woman? What does it look like for a woman to prosper as a woman. Right? And you approach that differently than you do when you go out looking to get laid. A friend of mine is a pastor that wears a collar, and he was sitting in a bar once, and a couple of guys bought him a beer and came over, and he waved him over, and they came over and they said, hey, pastor, we're just wondering if you could pray for us. And he's like, I would love to. What can I pray for you? And he said, well, we're both hoping to get laid tonight. Do you think you could pray a blessing that we'd get laid tonight? And he was like, sit down. Let's talk. Yeah. Let's talk this through. Let me talk about what you actually need, right?
Yeah.
They are confused about what they're for. So they're approaching the situation differently than they ought to. So often in our economic interactions, we do the same thing. We get confused about what a person is for, and so we approach them thinking, "What can I?" We approach them like a vampire, thinking, "How much blood can I get from them?" Rather than approaching them saying, "What would it look like for them to flourish? How can I serve them in such a way that they will move towards that flourishing?"
And some of the evidence of that we're doing that is there's all kinds of evidence, but the clearest evidence is just like the pimple on the face has been the requirement of vaccinations for people's employees.
Right. And sometimes it's employers that are they just look around and they haven't been thinking about any of these things. And
because their metaphysics is broken.
Right,
like they're not thinking, what are these people for? Like, what is,
And so then all of a sudden they think they've been thinking in terms of image, what kind of, they're thinking more like a Venus flytrap, right? They're thinking, okay, how do I get flies to come over that I can snap on and devour? And, so
it's the other way around.
So it's that moment when somebody says, well, you got to vaccinate or else, they think, oh, no fly is going to come over here if I've got unvaccinated employees, or they don't have any, or I mean, there's all sorts of, or they're thinking, oh man, if I don't make all my employees get vaccinated, when I go down to the country club later, I'm going to be in a weird spot, and maybe they're not going to keep letting me in. So sometimes it's social pressure, sometimes it's economic pressure, but they've been.
And I have no problem with social pressure. I just want the social pressure to be a certain type of pressure, right? Like, you don't glean. What do you mean you don't glean?
Right, yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
You're right. The social pressure is unavoidable. It's just whether or not it's pressure towards godliness or away from it.
That's right.
But all of those are just evidence that people are unprepared because they haven't been thinking about their neighbor properly. Right? They haven't been thinking in
Imago Dei.
Imago Dei, servanthood attitude.
So then here's the big kicker. The evidence that they haven't been thinking that is popping up is because the church, who supposedly is to bring the word of God so people know what God's standard is on this thing, are doing this. They shut down.
Yep.
They required masks to enter. They start having two different types of services. And then they're requiring vaccinations now. And so the church, I can just tell you, I've already seen four churches. And here's a kicker. I saw a black church do it. I was like, what the heck's wrong with y'all? I'm going nuts right now because out of all the people, I expected my social justice friends, my social justice warriors out there who we disagree on all kinds of stuff. But one thing that they have a nose for is discrimination.
Right.
And so I expect their nose to be extremely attuned to any sort of laws or mandates that would force black people or minorities or anybody, because I think black people have a responsibility, especially those people who have ever been in the lower part of the culture, have a responsibility not just for their own race to say when something's wrong, but for anybody.
Yeah.
So when they started killing more white people than when the police started killing more white people than black people should have been like, yeah, that's a problem. Why y'all killing y'all own like this though? Like, can a white boy live too? Can we all just live? That's all I'm saying. Because the problem was transcending race, and the people who could see it, who had a really good, pulse on something was broken was the minorities. And so they should have spoke up far beyond the racial issue and said, we have a ethical problem here that transcends a racial issue. Right. And so I'm looking at them right now, seeing in New York right now, the large majority of black people, things like 73% or something like that, are not getting vaccinated in New York City. Just recently with the new mandates, you just excommunicated a whole bunch of black folks from being able to go into environments in the public again. Again. I mean, that's what we
haven't heard about this, but that's
insane.
You can't come to this lunch
right?
counter.
Like, I'm sorry, man, you can't come in the store.
Lunch counter.
I can't come in.
Like, are we going to do sit-ins?
Right. And then there's exactly. And there's other crazy people saying, well, this is not the same thing as a civil rights. Like, hold on, man, this is worse. Because they doing it to white people too.
Well, I think, there's if we continue to divide people up into, racial groups to give political advantage to one. I mean, there's nothing sinful about noticing racial differences,
right.
Biological differences.
And we know that because we prize ourselves in some of them.
Yeah.
Right. We know that because we're like, yes, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. But it's granting political advantage based on any of those things. That's a problem.
Right.
Empires, though, depend upon granting political advantage based on holding the proper ideas, right? So, and so I think what has happened is we've actually been slowly shifting into an empire mentality, imperialism.
Slowly?
I mean, slowly in the sense that it's been going on for a while.
Yeah.
It's sped up recently.
You mean that we're finally understanding that?
Yeah, yeah. So, this division into ideologies, is actually, we need to resist it at that level, right? And say, this is not an ideological, this is not a matter, we're not going to allow our people, our neighborhoods, our cities to be divided up into us and them based on what ideas we have in our head.
We should.
God doesn't divide the world up.
You know
ideologically.
There is a lot of the foundations that we operate on that are doing that very thing. Mm-hmm. This is my biggest fight when it comes to baptism between Presbyterians and Baptists.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we have the luxury at all in Christendom, even though we can. I'm not saying you have to be Presbyterian. I'm not saying that at all. Yeah. That's not what people, I don't even care in some senses of how I wish you baptize your kids. I don't care that you have a different, theological position on the issue of baptism. You can have that. The part that I begin to really care about is when we excommunicate each other.
Yep.
Because of that.
Right.
So that now if I'm a Presbyterian and my kids are baptized and I go to your Baptist church, can we have communion together?
Yeah. Unfortunately, we taught America how to divide.
That's my point.
Yeah.
That's my point. We have, so that's my biggest thing on baptism. It's like, okay, can we still act like we believe that this is a secondary issue when it relates to the issue of baptism so that we don't lose fellowship with each other?
Right. And that should be the strength that Christians bring to the table in a situation like this, is that we refuse to be divided into ideological camps, right? So, because empires depend upon us being divisible into ideologies, right? And, because
that's Marxism right there, right?
It is, yeah. It's Marxism, any sort of internationalism, but because when God says, how does the world divide it up? He divides it up into tongues, right? Languages, people groups, cultures. Not cultures. That's not people groups, tribes, nations, cities. Right? There are ways that he divides them up. It's never. He doesn't divide us up into people that have this set of ideas versus people that have that set of ideas.
I would even say that the divide that I like to make, and I think that's all true, especially as you go through the Bible, you see the sacrifices that are being made. It's all in there like that in the Old Testament. I would even go and say that the clearer marker would be covenant sign.
Right. Well, and so all those different things are signs of, which group of people you identify with. But then the fundamental ones are all covenantal.
Right.
Yeah. The fundamental identity markers are covenantal. So I can go to somebody that speaks a different language than me. Right. And there's nothing fundamentally different about a Christian. I got to spend some time, working with doing some teacher training in Iraq, teaching classroom management in Iraq, and which was amazing. But what was interesting is hanging out with Christians there. We didn't speak the same language. We didn't. We sang a few of the same hymns, which was interesting. Mm-hmm. Some of the classic hymns they were singing in Arabic, but the fellowship was deep and abiding, even though it's through a translator, but because the thing that makes us who we are is more fundamental than those things. But it was actually, that makes it so that you can celebrate and enjoy those differences. I mean, I got to be there. I got to preach at a church in Duhok on the second anniversary of the legalization of evangelism in Duhok. Right. So for it had been illegal for over 1,000 years to evangelize. It was legalized 2 years previous, and so there was a celebration, and I got to preach, and
wow,
it was a huge honor, and then afterwards, each of the people that had been converted and baptized in that 2 years stood up and gave their testimony, and it was more than 50% of the church, right? So the church had doubled in size since the legalization of evangelism, and then this was amazing. They pull out this huge basket full of Roman candles, hand it out to all the kids, light it inside the sanctuary, and we start singing, and everybody's lighting off fireworks inside. It was it was surreal.
Roman candles just popping off.
And it was all the kids. So like they probably 3 and up. They gave the kids Roman candles, and they're dancing up and down the aisles, shooting Roman candles while we sing a hymn. It was such
what Bible verse is that again? I'm just trying. Paul's like, what is going?
Yeah, and I was like, this would not happen in the American church. We value things differently, and it's not that one is superior to the other, but it did open to my eyes to some of the things like we value safety in our kids in probably an imbalanced way, right?
Sure.
Nobody got burned, and if they did, it's just a Roman candle. And,
I'm just trying to figure out what part in the ceremony does Paul write Roman candles can go off in the. I don't know. I got my Presbyterian Reform side is like. Yeah. We'll work on that. Yeah, we'll work on that.
This is where I was never charismatic, so I'm looser.
Oh, okay.
So I'm just like, oh, that was fun.
Yeah. See, this probably for me is like the charismatic side of me. Like, that's great. But I know where this is gonna go. This is not.
But they celebrate, and then church ended, and then we went out and we danced in the front yard. It's these big circle dances, and because
break dance.
They had no. It was okay. Yeah, it's picnic dancing is what they called it. But,
picnic dancing,
but it was they believed they had something to celebrate. And so they were celebrating with their
summer
whole
soul,
body.
right?
Yeah, exactly. They said we are. They had a culture that they were celebrating.
I gotta ask, Jason, what's it gonna take for my Presbyterian white brothers and sisters to start doing that? Heaven? I mean, I'm just wondering, like, what's it gonna take?
Yeah. I mean,
I want to see Doug Wilson cut a jig. I'm just saying, I want to see it happen. I want to see.
Come in. I mean, I'll go dancing.
Yeah, but you're different.
It's might be true.
Yeah, I wonder. There is when you see, and this is kind of goes back to my comment earlier about my white brothers and sisters. It's been a long time since they've had. It's been a couple hundred years at least, well, more than that. Some of them have come over from Italy, and there's a different culture vibe that's there, but they haven't known a form of oppression in the same way where, and I think it's a lot of us. I mean, America spoiled all of us to where that you want to dance in response to the goodness of God.
Right.
And even in the trial, even in the dark stuff, and that comes out in some way or another. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So it is because
I don't think that's a cultural. I don't think that's a racial thing.
No, it's not a racial thing, but you see it in movies like The Graduate, where people you gain a little bit of wealth, and then you don't know what to do with the Ecclesiastes side of life, right? That things don't always just work out the way Proverbs says they're going to. Right? Proverbs is the way life generally works, but then Ecclesiastes is like, but those times when it doesn't work out that way, when the race doesn't go to the swift, and it's because there's actually this deeper aspect of God expecting that the world is designed in such a way that you have to live by faith. Right? That's what the book of Ecclesiastes is about, and that you gain a little bit of money, and then you don't have any place where you think you fit anymore because the world stops making sense, and you become, and you're told, well, you have to find an objective place in which to stand and look, and then you become incredibly self-conscious, right? Aware of yourself and the fact that you don't fit in the world, and so you can't dance. Dancing requires a lack of self-consciousness, and white people are way too self-conscious.
What just happened? That's okay.
That's a metaphysical reason why white people can't dance.
See, and it's funny because it's mostly an American thing.
Yeah, totally.
And it's because of the blessing and the wealth. It's funny too, as I've watched.
It's the blessing and the wealth, and then the belief that it came from an idol and not from God. That's what it is. Tell your story, and then I'll tell mine.
So I've watched just parts of black culture that have done really well for themselves. They've matured, they've grown up, and all of a sudden, so you go to a charismatic church, it kind of has, there's a undignified kind of feel to it. We gonna praise the Lord here now, and then there's a more dignified approach. Kind of. We don't shout like we used to. We don't, but God's still moving. Things are still good. We'll do a little clapping and some swaying. But that praise break don't kick in like it used to. That praise break used to be like, okay, now we know what's on the menu, what we're supposed to do today. But Spirit done came through and knocked off everything in here, and it's all messed up. Now, and there's some levels of black culture have raised beyond that. It's like they don't dance no more. Yeah. They just don't, and it's not going to. And I think they're self-conscious. All that stuff is true.
It was an interesting movie out on HBO about a middle-class black kid trying to become a punk rocker right now. It's really interesting to watch. And there were some black punk rock groups. There's Death in the late 70s. They were pretty good. And
they were all rejects, though.
All the punks were rejects.
Yeah. But the black ones were more reject, though. It's like...
They were. It's true. I mean,
he done went white.
but that is the... that's the mentality that this HBO show has, right? And so,
because it was true.
and all his black friends are like, "What are you doing? Why are you acting white?"
Right.
And all the white punk kids are like, "What are you doing?
Why are you acting white?
Why are you acting? Well, why are you acting rich?" Right? Like the punk rock, the punk. So there was poor punk rock, but then the wealthier folks that got involved with punk rock, it was a way of saying to their parents, "I'm not interested in the world that you're trying to pass down to me. Right? I don't want your culture.
I'm leaving the covenant."
Yeah. And but it was like rich people grabbed onto
interesting
punk, right? And so you have all these middle class kids shopping at Goodwill and Value Village pretending
Hot
they're poor.
Topic.
Yeah. And then Hot Topic is reselling stuff from Goodwill at 20 times the price. Right? But there's this, punk rock is a middle class problem, and now you've got black folks that are middle class and having punk rock problems.
That's true. I remember I saw the first Gothic black kid. I was like, "Oh, you all right, huh? Life good, huh?"
Yeah, and
I ain't mad at you. Okay, see what you're doing.
Because you have to have enough space to look around at the world and say, I've got time. I don't have to work constantly, just hand to mouth to survive. I've got a little bit of time to stop and reflect. I mean, Ecclesiastes was written by a king. It wasn't written by a pauper, because a pauper doesn't have time to reflect or to try out all those things.
One of the things that I
can't be Tom Bombadil.
That's a good point. Which, by the way, C.R. Wiley is writing a book on Bombadil. Yeah.
Oh, really?
yes. I'm looking forward to that.
Because my theory on Ecclesiastes is that we read it like he's some sort of existentialist philosopher, but it's actually, we should read it like it's written by Tom Bombadil.
See, I didn't have the experience of who Tom Bombadil was, and it's funny because C.R. Wiley, he talks about, I was like, he was the most powerful man. Because he understood family. He understood it was a metaphysical thing. He understood what people are and what they're for. And because he knew that, he knew the songs.
He knew, and he knew his own place.
He knew his own place in it. And because of that, and one of the things
that made him impossible to move.
Right. Because he knew that. And one of the things that C.R. Wiley says is like, we've lost those songs. We don't remember those songs anymore. But the way things are going, we're starting to remember what those songs sound like. Right. I thought that was a great line. It's like, yes, because there's something in us that when we hear those songs, we're like, that sounds familiar. I think that's what happens. That's what's happening. I think some of that happens on Cross Politics. I think Doug has been a huge part of that. I think the Logos in the education, the things that we've seen for the last 40 years in Christian education are people saying, I've identified with this song. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Family and culture. Yeah, this song makes me move a little bit. I think we're learning how to dance, we're losing that, our place where we thought we were, and we're getting bumped, and we're learning how to have that song is starting to, it sounds familiar, like we should be singing that song, Well,
and the ways that a culture is knit together is not by its ideas, right? A culture, a people group is knit together by its song and its dance and its poetry and its art and its, the habits of culture and the way that it talks and its idioms and those are the things that knit us together into a culture, into a people, and that make us feel comfortable, like we have a place, right? And so the things that are ours by nature of our birth, right? We were born into this people, into this place, into this family, and this. So
that's covenant. That's again.
I was going to try and get there, so all the Baptists were nodding their head before I. Those are the things that as a church we need to dig in on. As the church in America, we need to really dig in on. Because so if we think that we just got to get everybody's theology right, and then things are going to fall into place. Yeah, we're in for a pretty rude awakening.
That's right. That's a good point, because it's funny.
We tried that in the late 1800s and got Nazism.
We're still trying it, which is why we get more segregation from each other. It's funny with covenant, we forget that it's actually tangible. Right. With covenant, it's actually was paid for in blood, right? Like, you know what I mean? And so it's celebrated in a meal, and it has a sign of water, and so,
right.
And so death, resurrection.
My conscience can answer, yes, I'm clean. Well, how do you know? Well, Jesus took my sins. Well, how do you know that? Well, all the promises were put on me when my name was established in baptism, when the name of Christ was put on me in baptism.
And I sup with him every week.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. It's like he makes a meal for me every week, and I sup with him. What are you talking about?
And one of the things that
those are tangible things.
Right, they're tangible things, and we feel connected. We've talked about this some too, that we feel connected when our bodies sway together in music, right? And or when we sing in harmony.
Yes.
Right? When we sing in harmony with one another, there's this bodily connection that happens as well. And all of those things should be, as our children are enculturated into them, they learn who they are, what their place is. And this is, we get our citizenship in our country at birth, right? So we get our nationality at birth. But so often we wait for our kids to decide to become Christians later. And so that's something that's added on. It's not fundamental about who they are. And so they never really say, well, this is my place. Well,
and that's the schizophrenic part about it, actually. Because I actually think that everything that we do says you are a part.
Right.
Right? Come to the table, we pray together, we sing together, we teach them Christian songs, we teach them Bible verses.
Yeah.
We're saying you are as much a part of this as anybody else, except you're not.
Except you're not.
Right.
Yeah.
That's schizophrenic thing. A part of it is like we know, because we know that paideia, we understand that the enculturation of the Christian worldview is something that we should be handing to our kids from birth. Right, from birth all the way up.
Well, it's so interesting. I became a Christian late high school, started going to church, and then became Reformed and a part of a Reformed church. And I remember a bunch of, as I came in, people were like, "Oh man, VBS is the worst. It's so there's nothing in the Bible that gives us permission for VBS and all this." And I was like, oh, I mean, I guess I did used to lead VBSs and stuff, so maybe I shouldn't have or whatever. But then I was out someplace recently and somebody said, Father Abraham. And like people all around broke out that didn't know each other.
Had many sons.
And they all doing the hand motions.
Yeah.
And I was like, actually,
no.
we have walked away from something powerful, which is that there used to be this whole kind of culture throughout a lot of the church where there were certain songs everybody knew, certain things, and it was powerfully impacting.
We made kids sing "I Am One of Them," and so are you.
And I was like,
in a Baptist church, we saw Father Abraham.
That's really interesting. I was in a Presbyterian church, so it made.
Oh, okay, we were teaching kids,
and I was like, oh yeah, Galatians 5. But I thought it was so interesting. All these strangers in this big room all started singing together and doing the hand motions, and then they all kind of laughed and went on their way. And I thought, well, there's powerful stuff going on that because we think in terms of perfectionistic theology being the thing that we can fellowship about, we miss a lot of opportunities. Besides the fact that we're all in the process of growing and changing. I mean, so if we have to wait until we get our theology to a certain place before we can have fellowship with one another.
That's really interesting. You know, that's one of the things about art too, and the beauty of art that we've missed because we're so perfectionist in this, that we haven't figured out how to make the catechism such a song like Father Abraham.
Right.
And I bet you I can go up to probably, I bet you 90% of those people wouldn't know half the catechism.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But they all know Father Abraham. And so what we're seeing is that there's a chasm between how do we then, if catechism is the highest form of just knowledge, right? Just knowledge.
Yeah.
How do we communicate that in song to where it becomes bonded to the soul?
Right.
Right.
One of my early pastors said that the children of the church will learn all of their theology from the songs we sing. We've just left it that, right? That's where they're going to learn all of their theology.
But that's how we learned everything.
It is. So he was always really, and I think there's also the stories we tell is really important too. But he was really careful about both the theological accuracy and that kids could sing the songs in church, right? So like the kids were actually learning to sing all the songs, and because I was cracking a joke earlier, but about cultural appropriation. But
Yeah.
that's actually what we're after.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We want the world to appropriate our culture.
That's right.
And when you look at something like Summer of Soul and you realize how Christian black culture was at that point in time.
Goodness. Oh my goodness.
I think all of the liberals saying we don't want culture, resisting cultural appropriation, especially of blacks, is because they don't want people to become more Christian.
I ain't gonna say anything else about that. I think you might be onto something. Yeah,
Like,
and it's
you got to stop all this cultural appropriation. I mean, think about it too. Like,
you didn't reach us unless you was like you had to have some Christian on you. Like you had to have some sort of Jesus on you.
Yeah.
If you're gonna make it through, that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I was just listening to. I've got a new Toby Nwigwe is a rapper that
I still have my suspicions about that dude. I'm side-eye watching him.
Yeah, you could do that all you want. His beats are so good, and then I like the way he raps. Anyway, all that. He can make you as nervous as you want.
I'm Trojan horse a little bit on him. Anyway, I don't know. I'm watching him.
You might know more than me. I've been listening to him for like 2 weeks.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, a little bit. He's got some things in his. I think he has, and I think there's some black nationalism in him.
Oh,
that I think undermines
some of the lyrics.
Yeah. That undermines some of the stuff that I think that he really wants, and so, but he is clearer than most Christian rappers on a lot of stuff. I'm gonna say this too, and this will get me in trouble, but somebody who we know that has not got as much love as I think he should have gotten in the game is Sho Baraka.
Yeah.
Like hands down. I mean, as a skilled artist, the dude is phenomenal.
Well,
just as a skilled artist on that level.
Well, I think his new song "Healthcare." I've been listening to it a lot. I think it's the first time that I've listened to a Christian rapper and thought, you're challenging Wu-Tang.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. You're like
his lyrics and
his lyricism, and then just, I mean, and it's, it's got that.
We just got to talk about it being free. That's all we got to talk about. See how I do that? Like I'm all in. Just want to talk about like when you say free, like.
Are you talking about the healthcare being free?
Yeah. Like, he said that it was in the song. I was like, I don't know. I mean, if we ask for the government to make something free, like, you don't ask me for a cheeseburger for free.
That's what makes the poetry effective, though, is he just pokes everybody.
I know.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Yeah. Like, because with Sho, you start listening to like, yeah. Then he say something, you're like, hold on, fam. Like, hold on. I was rocking with you. And
it's
then,
like,
and then the next 8 bars, you're like, okay, that's good. No, that's good. And you're like, oh, hold on.
It's like Precious Puritans.
Yeah. Oh, that made everybody.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Well,
as a poet, it made me happy.
But with Sho, I feel like Sho, and we just talking about him, I feel like that he is very conscious of, I don't think he even tried to do it. I think he's poking both sides. He's trying to see clearly, and he's poking both sides. Well, I think that other people,
because when you're actively hunting for the truth, you're not looking for a tribe.
Right.
And so but you're willing to say, like, poke you in that eye, and then I'll poke them in that eye.
But my problem has been, inside of my conservative rapping friends, has been that you guys, and I'll even give you this, you guys have rightly, man, we've gone so long. Okay. You guys, we're just going to talk. I don't care. You guys have rightly poked at some things that I think are valid.
Yeah.
And a lot of people in reform world don't think is valid. Right. But I'm rocking with y'all. Like KB, he's another dude, man. I really like KB. We even talked a little bit on Twitter. I hope to talk to him again. But he's poked at some things that I think are right. And, but what I see them doing is poking left, but punching right. And what I want to see is, I think Sho does a better job of it. That's why I don't think it's intentional for him. He's just punching.
Yeah.
Whatever he's punching, he's punching. But I see some of them are so triggered or upset at what they see some of the conservative Christian reform people who are actually doing the opposite, which are poking right and punching left. Granted, but they don't show the standard objectively either. Yeah. So then they're only doing, like we talked about, the same side of a different side of the same coin when it comes to capitalism and Marxism, right? But they're doing the same thing. And so I'm like, hey, why don't you, when are you going to write the song on Marxism? Right. While you're talking about like capitalism and Christianity on this, when are you going to write the song on secularism? Like, you know what I mean? And so, and so they think they're writing the song on secularism as they take a good punch at Christianity, which it rightly deserves. And so I'd be happy for them to do like, okay, that was a good punch. Yeah. Like a lot of people ain't gonna like it, but you're right about that. Now where's the other song at? Because this other side, you know, look, this thing is a waterbed. It is not a plank. Right? It is a waterbed. If you push up one side, the other one's going to pop up. So if you tell me that this is wrong, then you're exalting this one regardless. There's no neutrality in this. So either you're going to have to poke a hole in the waterbed and play and lay out a new way, or you're playing favoritism one side or the other. Yeah. You know? And that's why nobody likes me.
That's true. Well,
wait, nobody likes me?
And the point I was trying to make with Toby earlier was they had him on the Dave Chappelle show. Yeah. Right. Dave Chappelle's a Muslim. Yeah. But a Christian in a black culture doesn't stand out the way a Christian in a white culture does. So
what do you mean?
Oh, I want to get back to the waterbed.
Okay. Get to waterbed. So we'll say that for that. We got to go in. We got. Yeah.
But the poet that is not willing to be a prophet needs to hang up his wordsmith gloves.
Can I add to that real quick?
Yeah.
Jason Whitlock, who I've recently developed a relationship with, he said to him, there's two people that failed us in America: pastors and comedians. Yeah. And it's like comedians are poets. Okay. Yeah, so he said the reason that they failed us in America, this is who he puts all everything we're going through right now, he puts at the feet of those two people. And he said the reason they failed us in America is because they are the ones who had the license to tell us the truth and they didn't.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And he's dead right about that.
100%.
So that's just amen to what you're saying.
And so when the opportunity to be a prophet arises, one of the things that happens is the people's first response is always to crucify.
If he's a good prophet.
If he's a good prophet.
Yeah, right? A prophet's not worth his weight in gold until people are ready to stone him.
And so
that's just real.
The poet that says, yep, you're still my people, and I'm going to keep telling you the truth, is of such immense value.
That's why I appreciate Shaw. I think he does that.
Right. Yep. 100%. They're of such immense value, but it doesn't feel as if you're being valued as a prophet by the people, because God is the one that that holds the reward for the prophet.
Yeah.
Right.
So he can't work out some sort of deal where it's like, hey, if I grow this community, I get this much money out the church.
Yeah, right, exactly.
He don't have the luxury of even having that.
And so, when you have opportunity to advance your career, by just making a little bit of just going a little bit light on some of this,
which is what I think.
Prophecy.
I think my thoughts is some of what Lecrae has went through is a swing on both sides, where for him, people like, now he's swinging back the other way, seeing things a little clearer, and people are like, but you were over there.
Yeah.
And you didn't see it.
Because one of the problems is we think more like, because we don't think like Christians. We think like, well, we've got political tribes, and that's where we're gaining our identity, rather than saying like, oh, we've got this guy. Well, he's one of us, right? He's my people, and he's pointing something out to me about some issue, right? And if my immediate response is, well, that's not the Republican position, rather than, okay, he's my brother, I need to hear him out, hear the context, then I think we are not hearing the prophets God has given us because we're compromised.
So many. We ain't got to stop there, because there's so many things I want to say about that, because I think some of the prophets are compromised.
Yeah, right.
Because they're bitter.
Oh, yes.
So then they sound like
all kinds of evil come from the root of bitterness.
I think there's some of them are bitter. Absolutely. There's I think Tabidi Onyebuile. I think that he had rightly seen some things and saw some things problematic, and then he became bitter, and we didn't
hear him right away.
Well, then we're like, you sound just like a critical race theorist Marxist person.
Because so much of Marxism is just envy.
Well, yeah, and I think, and then we couldn't hear him anymore, and so but there's judgments on both sides of that, but it doesn't prophets. If they become bitter, you have to find the well to jump into.
Right. Yeah.
You just got to. I need to die. I need to die. Kill me, Lord. Right. Yeah. And so that I can come back and then do the thing I need to do that's rightly so. And I think, praise God that some people have found the well and that we do need to listen to. That's kind of, for whatever the reason or the case, I've tried to be more in that vein. Yeah. Because I feel like there's so many things that I hear from guys who are prophets on the other side, and we don't agree with everything, but I know that's my brother. Yeah. And I think he's making some very valid points. And I've watched my friends who are kind of more on the white side of things, more the conservative Republican sides, just bark hardcore at those points. And I'm like, no, he's actually getting at a real issue that you're not taking into consideration. Yeah. And then they look at me and like, oh, okay. Right. You with them. I'm like, wait, I'm with the objective reality of what he's saying. That's what I'm with, Yeah. And that goes on both sides of that.
Totally. And sometimes it's just like he's speaking with an accent, and so he's not in my tribe. Is an accent that's other than mine, and so we're looking for shibboleths to prove that they're in my tribe. They're not giving them, rather than saying, well, no, I'm looking for the fruit faithfulness, right?
Yeah. And I think that and some of that is how we communicate, and man, we gotta go. Okay. But I want to say this, it's so important. Well, watch this happen so many times where the facts and the feelings and those two things are trying to have a conversation, and they just bouncing off each other. And so black people, a lot of people in my social justice movement, like, hey man, we got a police problem. There's some things going on over here. There's a problem. It's like, and then my friends on the white side, they go find all the stats, and they come back and be like, man, what y'all talking about? Police hardly kill any black people. They killing white people way more than they killing y'all.
As if that's a proof that things are okay.
And the black person's like, right, because there's more white people than us. So as a minority group, still a lot of people we don't want. I mean, I don't think anybody should be getting killed like that, because that's not right. So, but I'm just saying, like, maybe we should look at the whole thing, since y'all dying more than us. Maybe we can look at this. Like, it's like, and so now, because it's become so politicized now, everybody's figuring out, hey, maybe we do have some police reform. It's like, now it's cancel the police, and now it's like, oh, let's do some police reform. It's like, yeah. If we could have had a more objective conversation about this and try and hear each other out, it's like, well, show me what you're talking about. Like, what's the situation? What is happening? And just watch and maybe having more of a better dialogue to say, but maybe not everything is a Trojan horse.
Yeah. Well, I think you've got guys speaking really reasonably and rationally, like Killer Mike. They get no play. Right. They get
Killer Mike cares not if he gets play, because he gonna do what he gonna do, period.
But why doesn't he have his own show on the news yet? Right? Why are you giving it to but it's because he is trying to be reasonable, rational, build bridges, right? He's like, oh, we got a problem. We should solve the problem, rather than, oh, we've got a problem. How can I make money off it?
Right. Killer Mike won't get, because it's funny, even though ethically, I probably disagree with Killer Mike on a whole bunch of things. And yet I look at what he's doing. I'm like, hold on now. Me and Killer Mike got a lot more in common than people want us to believe that we do.
That's what I mean. It's you say somebody, you go, oh, he's on the other side, except for he wants to solve problems. Yeah. He wants to
government out of it.
He wants the government. He wants to solve problems, government out of it. He wants it it's for his local,
his community
people,
he lives in,
his neighborhood. And that guy should be.
He should be the first person that the Republican Party goes to and say, "What? How do you want to work?"
Exactly, right. But you got
he's too black hustlers. Though. That's the problem. I think, honestly, man, I think that the thing that scares a lot of conservatives is that they don't like the idea of of individuals being 100% of who they are because
you're
they
right.
think that they takes away from the collective.
You're right.
They can't celebrate those differences. And so Killer Mike is so pro-black that they think, oh man, that's just not going to be good. But it's like, but there's certain things that it's okay because what he's arguing for is where he's at, who he's serving, those people. This is why I got so much flack for people saying, give me the black church or I die with John Knox. But like, did you understand John Knox was pro Scotland?
Right. Yeah.
100% like,
right.
That's his folk.
And that's
okay.
That's how God, I mean, that's how God works. That's how God divides up the world.
Right.
So,
but just because he was pro Scotland doesn't mean that he was like anti.
Yeah.
Right. He was, but there's a certain thing that sometimes you have a heart for that God gives you for. We see this in missionaries all the time.
Yeah.
You know, I just got to go to China. Yeah. South Africa is my heart, you know?
And I think though, to bring it all the way back to economics, is we do have a scarcity mentality.
Yes. It's evolution. Yeah.
That God did not create a world with a scarcity problem. That is not, and we act like if we get something from God, that means somebody else doesn't. Like there's not enough.
We got a shorter part of the pie. Yeah.
And that's just not the kind of world we live in. And so much of that false economics depends upon an idol that is limited.
But dog, you know what, man? This is like, I'm getting so much trouble. This is a problem I have with a lot of Christians have set up this type of understanding. Mm-hmm. You watch Christian ministries, they are so tight packed and they only share their people. Even if it's good, everybody, I'm going to say this straight up. Everybody knows they need to be sharing Doug Wilson, but they read him. They read him privately. They don't want to talk about it publicly because they can't say, hey man, this is good. Like, you know what I mean? Right. Like, and I've watched from being inside, which is probably the last time I will be ever known, is that these groups, these sects refuse to promote each other.
Right.
Because they believe that there's only so much of the Christian audience, and to give this any ground publicly would mean that we'll lose something.
Yeah.
And so they're so centered on their little church. Man, I try and blow that all out the water. These are my people over here. Love those people over there. These are my groups over here. I want all of them to do well. Yeah. And you know, I want to promote them.
But you can't be generous if you're afraid there won't be enough to go around.
That's the problem. We have an evolutionary understanding as it relates to God's economy, even with people and blessing. We think that if we promote somebody else and what they're doing well, then we've just lost all of our funds and all of our giving.
Yeah.
It's like, are you insane? Who do you serve?
Right.
Do you serve Darwin or do you serve Jesus who made the world? Right? And the universe.
And it's a fundamental mentality about the kind of creation we exist in and the kind of God that God is.
Yeah.
That he is a miser. And so there's a limited amount, and if somebody else gets it, then I don't.
Yeah. That's we gotta get past that. Yeah. All right, that's enough. No more. Right. We're done. Do you know where you're going to be at September 9th through 11th? I do. You're going to be in Lebanon, Tennessee at the Fight, Laugh, Feast conference on the politics of sex.
Ooh, okay. All right. Well, do you know why you're going to be in Lebanon, Tennessee at the Politics of Sex conference?
I just
Country music center of the world.
No, because if we don't get God's design ordered rightly in our lives, you know, male, female, family,
marriage,
culture, marriage, you know, the politics of sex, what we're talking about. If we don't get this right, well, we're going to get what we got right here, right now, in this culture, which is hell-bent on destroying itself.
Yeah. You know why else you're going to go?
Why?
Voddie's going to be there.
Hey!
David Bonson, Pastor Doug Wilson.
Yes.
You guys going to be there?
I'm going to be there.
Uncle Gary's going to be there. C.R. Wiley's going to be there. Ben Merkel's going to be there. Everybody.
That's more than Fab Five.
We got SWAT talks all day Saturday. I mean, everybody from the Fight Laugh Feast Network's going to be there.
Oh, and I'm looking forward to the psalm singing, the ruckus psalm singing, and the Holy Ghost speaking in tongues.
Whoa. No.
We're not doing that?
No, we're not doing that.
Next conference.
Go to FLFnetwork.com, click on events, and register now. There's also a link down in the show notes. Just go down there, scroll down, find it. It's right around there somewhere. I think. Yeah.
What if we have a translator for the tongues?
No.